I think that's where I think more folks need to, more founders need to understand all the baggage that comes with raising VC capital to maybe also consider exploring other things.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. Today we're joined by Jason Bosco, who is the founder of Typesense. Typesense is an open source alternative to Algolia, so search API. Jason, thank you so much for joining.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Jack. This is great to be on the show.
So, Jason, the reason we're here today is because I read your tweet and I'm just going to read it. So this was on a DHH post. Conversation from a while ago. Me. We plan to run a revenue-funded company without raising VC. VC. Oh, if your plan is to run a lifestyle business, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. The way they said it was so derogatory, I was quietly enraged. Years later, we are happily revenue-funded, profitable and growing, serving 3 billion searches per month just on Typesense Cloud. And I'm here to tell you that you absolutely can build a solid business with big impact without raising VC.
Yeah, that was so I saw this. I was basically retweeting a video by DHH where he was mentioned the concept of lifestyle business and how folks look down on lifestyle businesses, and that his video, the way he expressed it, got me all riled up because I've seen the same thing where people think of lifestyle business as these this cute little mom and pop shop type of an operation, but I remember the conversations I've had with VCs. It's not just one person; it was a couple of people, and I've spoken to have that view of lifestyle businesses and bootstrap businesses, and at that time, we were not. I didn't have enough personal data points to be able to say no, lifestyle businesses are not a bad thing, and bootstrap businesses are not just a step to a it's not one step in the journey. Instead, you can be in a perpetual state of being what I call these days revenue funded and profitable. And at that point, I didn't have data points to that, but now we have data points firsthand, and I was like, okay, I got to be more vocal about explaining that there is another way to build a business, which is not going down the VC path, but the revenue funded, profitable, organic growth story. And that's what Typesense is. And I thought, more folks should hear about that path, because I feel like the VC funded path tends to be spoken about a lot, to the extent of people glamorizing it.
Like the default option.
Yeah, as the default option, exactly. And not many folks realizing the pros and cons that come with that path. And I'm here to say that no, that's not the only option. And I wish there were more companies that operated this way. And I feel like there are companies that operate this way, but not many of them are as vocal. There needs to be a lot of diversity in how businesses are run. And especially in the dev tools space, because these are core infrastructure tools that developers are going to adopt deep into their infrastructure. They need to exist for much longer time frames, and they need to be stable. They need time to bake and mature. And my personal opinion, of course, I'm biased, is that I think the revenue funded path for dev tools is helps dev tools more than the VC funded path, just because of the time it requires for a dev tool to really mature and and take shape and get adopted and visibility. But again, that's me. That's my opinion.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. At some point, you're going to land a big customer and they're going to ask you for enterprise features. That's where WorkOS comes in, because they give you these features out the box. Features like skim provisioning, SAML authentication, and audit logs. They have an easy-to-use API, and they're trusted by big dev tools like Vercel, as well as smaller, fast-growing dev tools like Knock. So if you're looking to cross the enterprise chasm and make yourself enterprise ready, check out WorkOS. We've also done an episode with Michael, the founder of WorkOS, where he shares a lot of tips around crossing the enterprise chasm, landing your first enterprise deals, and making sure that you're ready for them. Thanks, WorkOS, for sponsoring the podcast, and back to the show. Okay, so let me make the kind of like the devil's advocate on the VC of like when we talk about time and that they haven't got to worry about making money from day one. They could just focus on like getting usage and GitHub stars and that sort of stuff. And you're able to like bring in good people and you can quit your job and not have to worry about, you know, burning all your savings. And I guess you get people to like help you and that sort of thing. Maybe I've missed some here, but those would probably be like the strongest ones from my perspective. So could you make the case for the opposite, or just not raising money, the path that you went?
Yeah. So for us, I would say so to start a business, you're going to need capital one way or the other. It's how you raise that capital is what sets VC funded business apart from revenue funded businesses. Now, what we did in Typesense's case, for example, is essentially the capital was, so we started working Typesense as a nights and weekends project. So it's essentially our time that we're investing it, time we could have worked on other things or done other things. We decided to invest that time as a capital into Typesense back in 2015. So while we were still working full-time jobs at different companies, both me and my co-founder, we started working on Typesense because we were running into painful issues with search at different companies. And we thought it basically actually started out as an R&D project. We weren't, really planning to build something into Typesense into what it is today. But really, we were like, why is search this complicated is how it started. And as we realized that this is what goes into building a search algorithm and how things work under the hood, we were like, okay, maybe there is an opportunity. And we were dealing with Elasticsearch at the time. So we were like, can we simplify what Elasticsearch offers and build a much lighter weight product and take advantage of the fact that RAM is continuing to decrease in prices? So let's put the entire index in RAM compared to Elasticsearch. So that's where we were like, okay, there is an opportunity to improve and reduce the pain of existing like incumbents in the market. That's how the project started. And we thought, okay, it's more like an experiment. We were like, building prototypes, seeing if what approaches would work. So from 2015 to 2018, it was a lot of like R&D iterations, just figuring out which approaches or combinations of approaches work well, benchmarking things and figuring out the core architecture. And then in 2018 is when we decided to open source it, and we launched on Hacker News and Product Hunt. We got some initial feedback, but with that feedback, we were able to continue to iterate on the product for the next 2 years or so. And then, so again, all this while, we're still working at other companies full time. This is a nights and weekends project. And then in 2020 is when we had enough mass of users who were like, if you have a hosted version, we are ready to pay you for it. That's when we built the conviction of being able to quit our full-time jobs and start working on Typesense full-time. Now, another thing that happened for us in parallel is that, so my co-founder and I, we've worked on almost like, I think maybe 14 or 15 different side projects in the last maybe 15 years. And Typesense was one such side project, which evolved into a full-time thing. But there are like 2 or 3 other projects which got reasonable levels of traction, and the revenue from that set of side projects kept us helped fund Typesense in the first until it took us almost probably say we launched the monetized product in September October of 2020. So from Jan to October of 2020, that was essentially our other side projects that helped fund that period when we weren't revenue generating with Typesense as a product. So again, we do require capital. I mean, someone's got to pay, bills and stuff. So for us, that capital came from our own projects, from, other projects that we've done over, more than a decade. And that's what ended up fueling our initial starting path. And again, we're probably in a, fortunate position where, because we already had that demand. So by 2020, we had enough people, expressing interest in Typesense and also already self-hosting it. So when we launched, we had like paying customers in like the first week. So we were in a very fortunate position that launching the monetized product, immediately things started taking off, taking off from there. But again, the initial capital for us came from our own, other projects that we've built. So what I would say, so I've also heard other stories, like other founders, for example, doing, consulting on, things that they're experts in to raise capital for that initial period before their main product starts generating revenue. That's another way to raise capital. So raising capital is not the bad thing. It's what the expectations that come out of that capital you've raised, I think, is what throws people off. And specifically the VC route of raising capital has a lot of, not too well understood or visible expectations that I think that's where I think more folks need to, more founders need to understand all the baggage that comes with raising VC capital, to realize that, to maybe also consider, exploring other things where, other things which, either it's consulting or building other types of products to help fund your main idea, or, continuing nights and weekends to, as you build up your product. All these are, I would say, non-dilutive capital, because you're not giving up your company and control of the product and, and your trajectory to external, external entities, essentially. So that was our journey, how we, bootstrap Typesense.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't where I was planning on going, but let's open up the baggage. What is the baggage that comes with the VC route?
Okay, all right. Let me clarify that a bit. So, VC. Let me add a disclaimer here. So VC as an investment vehicle, I'm glad it exists. It has funded massive companies, which, from a consumer's perspective, it's amazing all the good things that VC-backed companies have brought into the world. Where I think you start seeing the baggage show up is, let's say, in year 6 or 7. So VC funds usually have like a 10-year life cycle. Usually in year 6 or 7 is when there's a pressure to start showing some sort of revenue metric, some sort of revenue growth, because at the end of your 10-year VC life cycle, you need to start showing, you need to have like an exit plan. Either it's an acquisition or you go public. So there's year 6 or 7, there's revenue pressure, and then eventually there's profitability pressure. And all of the things that the company has done in the first 6 to 7 years of maybe subsidizing some of the things that would have cost them more than what they actually charged customers for, all of that comes to bite them back. And that's where, I mean, this is a cycle I've seen repeatedly, where VC-backed companies typically start, doing some sort of let me talk about open source. So classic license change, like that has happened with Elastic and HashiCorp. Of course, it happens even after they go public. It turns out, where once you have the growth pressure, you have to do, you start thinking differently about open source, I guess. And then you start seeing features only being launched into the enterprise versions, and then you start seeing sales teams enter the picture, and then your public pricing slowly starts disappearing from your public pricing pages, and then everything gets rolled into a context us for pricing type of an operation. So it gets very sales driven. And I've also seen like sales teams end up raising their prices on every renewal cycle for existing customers. So eventually prices start going up. And this is a consistent pattern that I've seen across the board with like VC-backed companies. And eventually they end up, I feel like everyone tries to focus on like the Fortune, maybe the Fortune 5,000 as like the holy grail of trying to crack into. And when it comes to like, ACVs and deal sizes. So meanwhile, the market that helped them get there, which is like the small, SMB and the mid market, that market consistently keeps getting left behind, while all the VC-backed companies start focusing on like the top of the market. Because I mean, from that perspective, there's nothing bad in that, in the sense that it's faster to scale. It's easier, probably not easier. It's faster to scale revenue when you're looking at $1 million deals. For example, you only need so many a number of $1 million deals to be able to grow with a much higher trajectory compared to selling like $30 a month type of licenses to your much smaller customers. So it makes sense why these incentives are that way. But if you peel the layers a bit, where that push is coming from is because the expectations of the source of capital, which is VC, is the valuation of the company completely depends on the growth trajectory. So if you show great growth, regardless of profitability, if you show great growth, it's going to perform well either for an acquirer or in the public markets for a brief period of time, I should say, maybe. And then that ends up forcing, it's almost like the tail wagging the dog here, where the pressure to show growth ends up affecting the product and all the features and even the segment that the product is now affordable for, and the types of features that need to get built. Now suddenly all these enterprise features are piled on, and the product suddenly looks unrecognizable to someone who's just starting out trying to use the product. They're like, you have hundreds of different options. Like, how do I know which one to pick? Like that ends up happening. And that's where I think it goes back to the baggage of the incentive for the source of the capital is growth. And that ends up driving all the other things that happen in the company. And that ends up affecting customers. And for me, the biggest realization, so when we made the decision, and we've had almost like 35 different VCs reach out to us, over the last couple of years, wanting to invest in Typesense. And for us, the decision point was, at one point I realized that we're selling, two types of products. One is you're selling your core product that your customers pay for, and then you're selling your company's stock, which is also another type of product, but the customers you're selling your stock to is investors. So now you have two product lines, your core product and then your company's stock, and you have two groups of customers, your core customers paying for your core product, and you have your investors paying for your stock. And more often than not, your investor customers have a lot of influence on the company's trajectory, and that ends up affecting your core product. And now the irony of this is that the core product will not exist if it not were for the customers. So you end up sacrificing your core product and your core customers because of the expectations of this other group of customers. And finding that balance, I think, is what ends up, is the challenge for VC-backed companies. Now, some companies and then the definition of success also changes, at that point, where now it's even for all the employees and the founders, the definition is now your stock price appreciating and not your product improving, because that's where everyone makes their money. And anyway, long story short, that's the baggage that I think ends up affecting VC-backed companies, unless a founder is like very diligent about balancing these two. But even then, I've seen founders being asked to step aside and other CEOs brought in if that happens, they're too strong on how balancing this product versus investors, which is kind of like the sad thing to watch happen. But that's the cycle I've seen happen over and over again. So I'm trying to say that need not be the case. That's not the only trajectory. Like the other trajectory of when I wake up, the only thing that I worry about is, okay, what are our customers telling us? And what do we need to build to support the next set of use cases that our customers are reporting to us? Like that that brings so much contentment for me and satisfaction, that I wish more founders experience that and think of this as a a sustainable way to build tools over for tools that last more than a decade in like the mass market.
Yeah. That super, super interesting points. And I think that, as you said at the beginning, like the VC is like the default route. And I think like, I'm sure there's like some things that some people would debate you on, some of those of being like, kind of like, okay, maybe they should have just set up their license better, or like, from the start, or like thought about their sales process from the start and that sort of thing. But I think that, I feel like bootstrapping and gets like, or just not raising money probably doesn't get enough time in the sun. And I think like for me that would be the dream way to build a business. And there are like these big examples like Atlassian. I don't believe they raised any money. So I remember when I first discovered Algolia, and I used Algolia, and that was through I was using Firebase. And I went to the Firebase docs, and Firebase, there was no like default way to search at the time. Probably still isn't. And there was like, okay, here's Algolia as like the search option. And then I checked back today, and like Typesense is there as well. And I feel like these kind of things is like developers discover tools in this kind of approach. And no matter how much money you raise and try and like force that growth, you're probably not going to be able to just like get Firebase to add you to the docs without a kind of a track record and like length of time. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for us, it kind of is specifically like the Firebase mentioned in the docs kind of happened organically. There was so Firebase users discovered Typesense, and we're building integrations themselves, and basically so I tend to have a lot of conversations with our customers, and I kept hearing that people were using Firebase, and then they were using this, and one of those users, thanks to them, they were very vocal about Firebase supporting us in some capacity, and they were like, "Hey, why haven't you guys added Typesense into the docs?" And so we essentially had like a user who was a champion for us,
Really?
and they had used Algolia and they had used Typesense, and they were like, and Elasticsearch as well, and they were like, I don't understand why Typesense is not mentioned. So that strong push from the Firebase user ecosystem, like things like that, to your point, that takes time.
Yeah.
It can't be just one user,
yeah.
Just discovering something new and then saying, hey, this would be nice if you guys added this. I think it takes an ecosystem of like a critical mass of users in that ecosystem, using the product, and then also help improving the product. And then that also happened a lot, where we would get feedback from users from the Firebase ecosystem. We were improving Typesense as well. So that takes time to build that relationship, that to mature things, and then it happens. Like it wasn't like a thing that we reached out and happened. It happened kind of where if the push came from the user, like the Firebase user side. So to your point, that takes a while to build up, and mature. So I'm glad that happened. Like same thing with like we recently contributed integration to Laravel. And for the longest time, Laravel users were asking us for a Laravel integration. At one point, we're like, let's just build it. And then we maintain it as a third-party library separately. And over time, as we started getting feedback, we kept improving things, both again in the Typesense product and also in the Laravel integration. And then we were eventually able to get to a state where we were able to go to the core Laravel team and say, hey, we have enough users using this, and Typesense is being used at scale. with Laravel users, what do you think about, can we contribute this upstream back into like the Laravel core to make that happen? So, but to be able to get to that stage, so this happened in 2023 last year. So it took 2015 to 2023 of all of the things that we had done to that point, where it was sufficiently in a good place for us to be able to build that trust, and for us confidence to be able to go, us and ask, and also be able to be in a position to consistently support any issues that are reported, and any feature requests that come up, etc. So I think things just take time, especially in dev tools. I feel like the more you force something on a large group of developers via any form of marketing, I feel like you only get more pushback, because it's like things being overhyped is I think people are starting to see through it these days. So anything that comes out with too much hype, there's always going to be that set of users who are like very distrusting of why suddenly something is this popular. And I think going down the path of slow, organic, when it's word of mouth type of growth, which takes a lot of time to happen, then I think you overcome that distrust that comes with hype-based, hyper growth type of ecosystem. So, and it also, frankly, I feel like this gives you more room to breathe and to also mature your product, instead of always, trying to fix bugs and like put out fires and whatnot. Being able to do it in your own timeline with near infinite runway is much more productive, I feel like, and required almost in like any deep infrastructure tools. The question is, how do you build up that runway to be as long as possible for you to be able to build a deep product, deep, mature product that can be adopted by the market? And how can you stay in that adopted state and not fall out of favor when you suddenly start going up market, and then the next wave of startups come along and take your pie and the cycle repeats? That's the challenge, I think.
Yeah, kind of like touching on that. Like I definitely spend too much time on Twitter, and sometimes like in dev tools and tech, you kind of always feel like you're running out of time, or like things are just constantly changing and stuff like that. And like, so obviously we've had the advantages of like having time and not having the pressure with VC funding. But like, how does I guess this is my own insecurities question. Like, how do you think about the opposite challenge, where like you have to move fast?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, and this is maybe unique about the search space, is that the market is pretty large, and also search as a problem has always existed. Just like how databases, as long as databases are around and you need a way to store the data, you're going to need a way to retrieve that data in a full text way, or using embeddings or whatnot. Data retrieval is never going to go away as a domain. And in fact, like, before Elasticsearch, there was Solr, and there were, a couple of search products even before Solr. So search has been around for decades now. And so moving fast is relative when you look at those long timescales. As long as you keep up with what your customers are telling you as their, most pressing needs are, then the problem space is not going to go away. And now the mechanics of how you approach search might change as more hardware improvements show up, more ML improvements show up. The mechanics of how you implement search and data retrieval is going to change, and the challenge is to keep up with that, which also means keeping up with what customers expect, from their own consumer search experiences. But it's not something where if you don't launch this particular feature by Q4 of this year, it's going to be a make or break. That's just not a thing in information retrieval. I feel like it's an evergreen thing. So maybe I should qualify that uh, uh, that in deep R&D type of spaces, evergreen R&D type of spaces, I think you have the flexibility and the luxury of taking more time than if you were, for example, let's say, if your idea is something that requires a particular time, high stakes. If you don't capture the opportunity by this time, there's going to be tons of other folks, or you're going to miss the window of opportunity. Then you need to scale up really fast. That is a great application for like VC capital. So, but I like to think that dev tools in general have more breathing room.
Yeah.
And there's sure there's a cycle, but the cycle, I feel like the current set of cycles keep getting created by VC backed dev tools. When you look at, for example, I'm a big fan of like Ruby on Rails as a framework, has existed for forever now.
Yeah.
And it continues to innovate, and it gets its job done and gets out of the way, and you can focus on like the business logic, versus having to build plumbing. Like, we need more tools like that which stay around for the long term and do the thing that they say they do well, versus always having to, for example, new version launches have a bunch of different features. Now you have to upgrade to all of that, and then you keep like that cycle. I feel like is going to get pretty tiring for developers. Every couple of years, say this is the next big thing in dev tools. And unlike consumer products, dev tool products, you require a lot of effort to integrate with and also keep upgrading. And that fatigue of having to keep up with the next set of features, even within the same framework you're using, for example, it's going to get pretty tiring soon. So I would actually wager that the slower dev tool releases, big bang features, the more adopted it's going to be, because the rate of churn and the rate of amount of effort to try to keep up is lesser than going with something that keeps releasing every month or so, for example. So I feel like I went off on a tangent there, but
no, that makes sense. Have you got any examples of like developer tools companies that like in this space that like you really look up to as well?
In this space, I would say, so let me define this space. So this space as companies that have not raised
this
VC funding. Yes. So Flagsmith is another company that has not raised VC funding.
Yeah.
So I'm fans of how they approach their initial, funding story, of how they funded the initial development before they launched Flagsmith as a standalone product. So that's completely different from how we've done it. They went down like they were an agency, and then they saw a need for among their customers, started building a product. So that's a great model. But let's see, besides that, it's interestingly every other company that I know is VC backed in the dev tool space.
Yeah, maybe if anyone's listening and they know any like kind of bootstrapped, non-VC funded dev tools, like tweet at us or something, and we can try and like maybe there could be some kind of a list. It'll be super cool. I definitely want to talk to more people doing this approach.
Oh yeah, for sure. By the way, on a side note, so I mentioned this briefly to you earlier, but I've also started using the word revenue funded instead of bootstrap. That's another thing I've heard in the past is people tend to think of, you go from bootstrap and then that as a step to then, you've not yet raised VC funds. So you're bootstrapped, and then step 2 is raising VC funds. So, and it also conveys a little early stage than, if you say you're VC funded, that feels later stage. So what I've started doing is, I've started using the word revenue funded instead of bootstrap. So revenue funded to me feels like it conveys a state of perpetual being, where it's not like a step towards something else. It's you're revenue funded and you're profitable. I feel like that describes So what I like to say is we were bootstrapped,
Yeah.
meaning that we funded things ourselves, and then we are now revenue funded and profitable is how I like to describe ourselves. So I'm hoping that that's something that I frequently say, shout from the mountaintops anytime I get a chance. But hopefully that terminology is something that we get to adopt as this style of companies start coming up.
Is that to do with like enterprise customers and stuff like that, where they kind of start to do due diligence, and then like if they saw, oh, okay, there's a bootstrap company, oh, maybe we need to go with like the really stable one. This doesn't sound stable. Like,
yeah, I mean, there's maybe a little bit of that, but it's more, for me, it's more of new. It's not just enterprises. You'd be surprised. Like even startups who are, a couple of months old have in the past told me that, oh, you're bootstrapped. Oh, so even though, we are revenue generating and profitable, a startup that's 2 months old will look at us and say, oh, you're bootstrapped. And
don't trust you.
Yeah, think differently. So that's the perception I'm trying to address. Is that, again, because for better or worse, the word bootstrap has been used to refer to like very early stage companies.
Someone in the bedroom.
I think, which is why I like to say revenue funded.
Yeah.
As we're way past. We're not bootstrap. We're now revenue funded. Is how I like to say.
Yeah. Which I guess should just be a company.
Exactly.
But yeah. But we live in a weird world. Yeah, that makes total sense. Do you see any kind of other areas that's kind of like ripe for someone to do something similar to Typesense?
I mean, I guess I haven't thought about other adjacent spaces, but I guess the biggest thing is now anything in the like in the ML space is because that's the trend of the day. But I think the ML space is interesting in that it requires a lot of capital investment for sure. It's going to be really hard to bootstrap your way to a revenue funded company because I mean GPUs are expensive. You need to if you're going to do it without having to pay one of the larger AI companies, you're going to have to acquire GPUs, and those GPUs are going to be expensive. So I think something like that, and also similar to like the hardware space, for example, there is going to be a lot of upfront investment. So I'm definitely not saying that like what I'm saying is not universal for sure. I'm only specifically saying for dev tools like software companies. That's where I think the application of like VC principles, I feel like tends to distort the natural progression of these of this type of software. But anything that's capital intensive, by all means, I think VC. I'm glad just as an entrepreneur, I'm glad that VC exists because it has spurned and helped so much entrepreneurs, help experiment with different ideas and bring different ideas to life. So I'm glad it exists as a theme or as a vehicle. But for dev tools, not so sure about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess I didn't answer your question. Nothing off the top of my head, but I feel like there's still so much undiscovered space in like the ML area that something there could be interesting, even if it's not consumer facing applications. I would think of it as selling shovels during the gold rush type of a thing. So is there any tooling as a dev tool company? Like, is there any tooling that you could build to speed things up? Or maybe that might not require as much capital as like you're not building your own models or training your own models, for example. But is there a tool that you could use to cut down costs or improve efficiency in that space? I think that could be an interesting space for the next generation of companies to come out of.
Yeah, I agree. This feels like a mega trend. There's just yeah. Jason, I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for joining. Before you go, I wanted to ask you one more question, which is just if you had like one takeaway from this conversation that you'd want founders listening to hear, what would it be?
I would say think of multiple ways to fund your operations and not VC as the only path. Like I would recommend coming up with creative ideas for this capital, whether it's through consulting or building other products. I've seen some folks build info products, for example, like publishing content or helpful material in that space. Running an agency, for example. So there are so many different ways, and look and consider VC as just another way among all the other possible ways. So I really hope that becomes a more common thing, and people don't default to looking at VC as the only way to build a company with large impact, especially in the dev tools space.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And where can people learn more about you and about Typesense?
Yeah, so I post on Twitter, so it's Jason Bosco on Twitter, about our journey. We try to keep our blog updated on typesense.org/blog. So we might say you have to come up with new articles shortly. But so far, we try to keep our blog more around the company building side of Typesense and not like feature launches and etc. We use separate channels for that. So if you want to sign up for our blog as we post new articles, we'll keep you updated on our thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jason, for coming. And hopefully some people will reach out on Twitter and tell us about their revenue funded developer tools.
Awesome. That'd be awesome to watch. If that's the outcome of our time, that we recorded this, that'd be amazing. I'll be a happy camper.
Amazing. Thanks, Jason. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Thanks, Jack.